Hello everyone, my name is Raijin, and I'm here to shed a new light on the anime film Your Name. Because even though it released 5 years ago, it is arguably even more relevant today. Throughout this video, I want to reconnect you to the parts that anyone can love, and by sharing a tiny understanding of Japanese culture, I'll help you connect even further than that to understand how it really is one of the most important films to ever come out of that country. And hopefully this time you won't, forget. Makoto Shinkai's Your Name released in 2016 with incredible success. It has stunning visuals, a wonderful score, lovable characters, and the type of experience that rewards you in some new way every time you watch it back. There is a lot to say about this movie. The least of it is that for a movie about the interconnectedness woven deeply into our everyday lives, its scenes handily deliver that same feeling of everything coming together, everything mattering somewhere else, somehow. It is an hour and 40 minutes long, but there is not an ounce of fat on this movie. Every twist, every transition, every body swap. Though we didn't know at the time, Mitsuha goes through the identity crisis and makes every effort to connect. First, Taki does not recognize her, and she remains a thing of the past. After that, the audience follows Taki's journey as Shinto tradition gives him the chance to complete the connection. In Mitsuha's body, he awakes the day of the festival, and after the two share a moment on the mountain, Mitsuha and her friends manage to save everyone from dying to the comet. Unfortunately, she and Taki forget each other, and it takes 5 years into both of their new lives in Tokyo before they meet again and remember each other's names. From start to finish, it is so carefully constructed not only to tell a story about Taki and Mitsuha, but Japan at large. I'll get to that, but first, it may seem a little late to you to be talking about this movie in 2021, but it shouldn't, because this movie takes place in 2021. The movie's ending is set 5 years after 2016. The song that plays as the kids try to evacuate Itomori is called Sparkle. As its lyrics say, everything up till yesterday was a prologue. When I listen to that song, I hear everything before the time skip was a prologue. This is the starting point for the real story to be told. Now, here we are in that time frame of 2021. Now is quite literally the time for this movie. So before getting into Japanese culture, let's talk about the movie. Almost every time I watch Your Name, I key in on something new about it. The movie is incredibly layered, with so many individual elements coming together to make something magical. So I'm going to go from topic to peel all of those layers back. I will start, as the movie does, with Mitsuha. Mitsuha's story is about as tragic as it can get. Aside from her tragic death, she hates the life she has. And once these body swaps happen, that's her chance. She takes advantage of them to organize a special day full of activities in the city of her dreams. Yet, not only does Taki take her place, but the date she set up is also her inadvertently pushing him, the boy she likes, towards his crush. Understandably, this depresses her, so she goes to Tokyo anyway that day to see him, except, oh wait, she's 3 years too early, this guy doesn't know her. When she goes back to Itomori for the festival the next day, she cuts her hair to try to move on and dies to something nobody could have predicted because that information was just lost. Taki. Mitsuha wants him, and Mitsuha wants to be him. I really want to take the time to empathize with her in this video because she's really only present at the very beginning. Most of the movie is with Taki once the conflict starts, because the conflict is losing her. For the time that we do see her, she's depressed, and that's completely understandable given what the movie is trying to say about her home. That date Mitsuha set up occurs partly at a photo exhibition named Nostalgia. Nostalgia is the rose-colored glasses that somehow make the grass greener. With it comes the sense that you have lost something. And in this movie's case, it is arguing that we are not who we used to be, and there comes the argument that we need to reclaim that. This movie is literally the fight to save Mitsuha and Itomori's lives. But after that, It is the fight to make sure that they are still a part of us. That photographer is nostalgic for Itomori, but Mitsuha doesn't share that nostalgia at all. She lives in it, so when she looks at Itomori from her perspective, she sees one train, no cafes, no fun, and no dating pool. The first days she spends in Tokyo, though, it has everything. Trains every minute, plenty of cafes, and plenty of students her age who can bring McDonald's to class or skip clubs to go to the movies. The grass is always greener on the other side, but through the conflict, both sides will have to find one solution that works the best for both. That photo exhibition argues that Tokyo or Japan has lost a sense of themselves, but Itomori lost a sense of who they are too. You may recall Mayugoro's Great Fire. It was a building caught fire spreading to the shrine and its documents. On the surface, it's just the way to explain why nobody in the town knows about the comet. But think about it, even Itomori's oldest tradition is lost to time. Itomori is missing that connection with itself, and they were quite literally hopeless from the start. So aside from Taki and Mitsuha trying to connect in this movie, it's also about the fact that Itomori needs to connect with itself too. By the end of the movie, you know that the two craters that make the lake are from comets. But so is this. If Itomori knew everything about their tradition, they'd probably still know that the House of the Relic is in another giant crater from likely 1200 years before the lake. How else do you explain this formation, right? And it is here that the climactic, pivotal scene plays. Taki and Mitsuha on the mountain. I would argue that the music that plays here is the most widely known from the film's musical score. If you do know this scene's music, and you do pay that much attention, you still may not have realized that it is the musical theme for Dream Lantern, the song that plays for the opening credits. Dream Lantern is playing underneath this scene, and as it builds, Mitsuha's musical theme starts playing too, in the instruments used for Taki's first visit to the mountaintop relic. That means that the same reverence given to the deity is now given to Taki and Mitsuha's time together. These music choices emphasize how wonderful and sacred it is that they are able to share this moment. And with Dream Lantern's music playing, it's also as if Taki and Mitsuha are finally able to say this, or deliver on this. And of course, with the pen drop, this music cuts abruptly too, leaving the words unfulfilled. And that hurts. Any piece of art is greater than the sum of its parts. So many things work together in a scene, and often the musical score pulls a lot of weight. They can truly elevate whatever movie or show they're made for, and this movie's score, composed by Radwimps, is no different. Listen to this short piece. This is Mitsuha's theme, or part of it. The theme of somebody who seems so close, yet so far away, barely unreachable. It plays when the switches stop happening, when Taki relives how Mitsuha tried to visit him years ago, and 5 years later when he can't remember what or whom he is longing for. Except that third time, it's a little distorted. There is that off-key note added, and more things later on, to signify this malaise that he can't place. It's a tune that maybe he used to know a lot better, but now it's become tainted somehow. But he can't even realize that. There's also a sound cue for Mitsuha, the wind chimes.
No, I just didn't feel like going, that's all. Huh? Could she be over there?
Unlike Mitsuha's theme, the chimes make her feel close. When they play, there's this rush that you're going, she's right there! So even though Katawari Doki, the score at the mountaintop, is so memorable and for good reason, Both Mitsuha's theme and her chimes push and pull on your feelings without you even realizing it. Mitsuha is so close, but impossibly distant. That's because the score and the movie in general put you in Taki's head. We are Taki. This movie is Taki's journey as he chases his memory of Mitsuha. Fortunately, he is successful. Let's go back to that scene. They are together on the mountaintop for a remarkably long amount of time. That probably sounds wrong to you. The scene comes to a sudden, heart-wrenching stop. But before that, they're able to laugh and enjoy the moment enough that the scene cuts to later on when the story picks back up. They are out there being young, being themselves for a decent amount of time. We just don't see it. Which is why now is the perfect time to transition to talking about trains. Yes, trains. When you think about symbols or prominent devices in the plot, you're probably likely to think about the braided cords or Twilight or the concept of time. And yeah, it all comes back to time. But the biggest unsung recurring motif in this movie is the train system. From beginning to end, trains play a vital role in the movie's suspense, the connecting threads. I once read a story about a Japanese man who was on a delayed train heading to the Osaka terminal. When Japan Railways, the transport company, foresaw a late arrival, they started up a different train at the station for all the passengers waiting there. This was for a delay of 2 minutes. 2 minutes would have been such a break from the cultural norm for what the railway deems as acceptable that they went out of their way to fix it and stay as punctual as possible. Now, that was super surprising to me at first. Like, where I'm from, if a train is 5 minutes late, nobody cares. Nobody bats an eye. It might as well be on time. But Japan goes through such an effort to prevent something like that. So, like, their punctual is so much more punctual than my punctual. Why am I telling you this? Well, now you understand that trains are probably the best symbol you could have for how fast-paced and strictly scheduled life in Tokyo can get. Aside from the fact that Taki didn't recognize Mitsuha on the train, it offered them an extremely short moment together compared to what the deity Musubi and Twilight did for them, which in itself was still too fleeting. There's a lot you could unpack thematically from that, like only in Itomori are they able to have a meeting long enough for something to stick. So, the trains are important, but I do want to talk about Twilight for a second because it is a key component. First off, it's not just this scene. It's here.
Maybe I can see the comet.
Huh? Oh. Mitsuha, you're dreaming right now, aren't you?
And it's here.
You've got to know about that disaster 3 years ago, right? Hundreds of people died?
I mean, I still have the memo she wrote.
The sun is low, and they encounter something not human. Twilight is a transition between day and night, just as Taki and Mitsuha's adolescence changes their childhood into adulthood. Shinkai has said that he made the movie partly to ease adolescent stress, so Twilight is a really fitting plot point. Twilight is fleeting, just as adolescence is, just as Taki and Mitsuha are, just as Itomori, and even Tokyo. It's a great element for this movie because of something called transient beauty. Basically, the shorter something is, the more special and the more beautiful. The Japanese coined the term mono no aware for this. An example of this is that, aside from the fact that cherry blossom petals look pretty, they bloom and fall in such a short time. They are beautiful because you were able to be there at that time to see them fall. It's a very Japanese thing, but of course, as this movie shows, there's a lot of truth anybody can find in that regardless. And knowing all of that, I want to share these words from earlier again. Mitsuha goes through the identity crisis and makes every effort to connect first. Taki does not recognize her and she remains a thing of the past. After that, the audience follows Taki's journey as Shinto tradition gives him the chance to complete the connection. If we're going to get anywhere, I want you to stop thinking about the movie in terms of Taki and Mitsuha. It sounds silly, they are the two lead characters of the movie, but characters exist to represent ideas. The biggest picture of what's going on in this picture is not the relationship between Taki and Mitsuha. It's between Tokyo and Itomori. So, yeah, think about Taki and Mitsuha, but think about them for what they say about where they're from, because that is the message here. We can change Taki to Tokyo and Mitsuha to Itomori, and the words mean the exact same thing. Both of these stories are happening in this movie. So whether we're talking about Taki or Mitsuha or Itomori's Lost Tradition or the film's score or the trains or Twilight, you may get what I meant when I said everything matters somewhere else, somehow. It doesn't just matter somewhere else in the movie. These all matter to Japan as a whole. And again, we can see how easy it is for anybody to connect to Your Name, but the fact remains that it was made for Japan. That means the way the movie ends is at least somewhat curious if you don't live there or have enough experience with it. Taki and Mitsuha find each other in a place where Twilight cannot separate them. But the moment they're about to say their names, the camera tilts up and the movie ends. Why? Is that confirmation, or what happens after that? Why does it end right then? So to help you understand, now we're going to talk about Japan. Japan is in the middle of a cultural shift, as we all are, and cultural shifts are very broad and slow-moving. But Japan is becoming more and more metropolitan. As time passes, either its small towns look more and more urban, or its people move away to places that are. And this has happened enough that Japan has a pandemic of ghost homes, where many of its rural towns are as much as a fifth unpopulated. And there is one small town, smaller than even Itomori, that is very much experiencing this. Amano no Sato. They are a farming village deep in the mountains of the Wakayama prefecture, known for having exceptional rice because their climate is perfect for cultivating it, specifically the way that the temperature can fluctuate from day to night. Their shrine, Nitsuhime Jinja, is one of the oldest in Japan, with some accounts dating it at least 1700 years old. It documents the fusion of Buddhism and Shinto in Japanese worship. I visited there as part of a larger trip in December of 2018. Winter hadn't quite started yet. Autumn coated the hillsides with oranges and reds like fire, and combining that with the thick fog in all directions, the atmosphere felt somewhat sacred, like a world all its own, separated from the bustling life in every city I visited up until that point. Time was slower there. Amano is doing well, but some of its residents know in the back of their minds that it's only doing well for now. That article from earlier, 18% of the homes in Wakayama are abandoned. Many of Amano's residents are elders, and the population is dwindling from people moving away, too. Those who move to Amano have already started families, so that population growth doesn't hold. While I hope the shrine is around and active for 1700 more years, I don't know. And that really hurts to say, because I broke bread with them over a hot pot. I was present for a ritual at the shrine in a downpour of rain as ceremonial music played from a recording instead of live instruments. I watched a blacksmith work his craft. We made and ate mochi together. We connected about as well as a translator, which sometimes had to be Google, would let us. But it was real. When the people of Amano watch Your Name, they understand it. It is real. They're watching their Japan replicated on the big screen. I know I've done incredibly little research and could have a lot of confirmation bias. If I took my experiences in Japan at face value, that's fine. I still went there. I still made a connection. I still wrote a good few journal entries. I read those journals again the other day and realized just how much I'd forgotten. I opened up photo albums and memories came flooding back. We can all empathize with Taki and Mitsuha at the film's end. 5 years is an incredible amount of time, and when you're a teenager, they're your formative years. These two are entirely different people at the end of the film than they were at the beginning, but there is enough of the person they were on the mountaintop inside of them that they cling to and want to bring back out. As I look through the photo album and read the journal and reconnect with the 3-year-old memories that I had, it was a similar experience for me. Even watching this movie, it's the same way, since so much of what I saw and did happens or shows up here and there for a bit in all the different shots. And now we are in the time frame of the movie's ending, 2021, so it's an appropriate time to look back. So, think back to what you were doing in 2016. Is there someone or something you'd love to catch up with, or have you not done something in years that you'd love to get back to that maybe you even forgot that you stopped doing? Those are the kinds of questions that this movie is asking the audience that it was made for. How can we bring into the present what we left behind in the past? That is Your Name's central question, its message, and it baffles me how perfect it is. It is not arguing we should go back to the way things used to be. Because even in a world where Musubi can turn back time, the goal is not to live in the past or to preserve Itomori completely from the threat of the comet. If you can prepare for these things well in advance, you can prioritize ways to prevent them. But that's not where Japan is. There is no restoring Itomori. Time marches on. This is the nature that Japan must live in harmony with. You have to accept the inevitable changes that it brings. Because no matter what, the meteor comes and the townspeople are in the disaster radius, or they're not. All anyone can do is integrate Itomori's way of life elsewhere. The goal is to preserve Itomori's traditions through its people, wherever time may take them. That is where Shinto comes in. Shinto, literally way of the gods, teaches to honor the gods through keeping traditions alive. Mitsuha, her sister, and her friends all live in Tokyo at the end of the movie, but they carry Itomori with them. Much like I said about trains, there are so many different elements that the more you read into them, the more you get out of them because everything is so symbolic and intentional. Earlier, I said that you see the movie through Taki's perspective, and that's because it's trying to speak more to places like Tokyo. There's a lot of little things that go along with that, like the fact that real spots in Tokyo were recreated for this movie. That the ending occurs in the springtime, rife with cherry blossoms. That ties back to Mona no Owari. The photography exhibition, named Nostalgia, argue that Japan is nostalgic for Itomori. But it is certainly not relevant that in Japan, just like the grandmother says, mountaintops are traditionally seen as a place where our world and the world of the gods meet. That has nothing to do with this. Culture unites all of these things together, and because the movie so successfully connected with its audience, that makes the connection in the movie strong too. Taki and Mitsuha's connection at the end of the movie is only as strong as the viewer thinks it is. You do not see them remember, so you are left to assume. At one point, a more perhaps cynical part of me was not entirely convinced personally that Taki and Mitsuha recognize each other at the staircase. They say over and over again, like, if I just know her name, if I just knew his name, I would remember. And that was moments after they're on the mountain. Then 5 years pass, and they're still helpless. Like, I can't say they'd still be able to remember everything just from the name. Now, I don't look at it that way anymore. But you say, surely they must. They have to. Because you want to believe it. Because it's the film's title. And because believing it means that Taki and Mitsuha's efforts to connect were not wasted. You want them to be together. And that's the point. The movie argues that Taki and Mitsuha should be together. It wants you to want that. It doesn't show them reconnecting because you should believe that they do. The two spend the whole movie trying to connect and failing to make it stick. When they finally get the chance for it to be permanent, without the fleeting trains or twilight interfering, the movie leaves it up to you. It says, viewer, here is their last connection. Will you make it happen? If you say yes, the movie has done its job. If the Japanese watch the film, get to the end, and say yes, the movie has done its job, because Taki is the modern city and Mitsuha is the traditional town. And wanting those images to be together, sharing experiences, learning and growing and living together, even if it means that traditional towns can't be the way that they used to, So long as the Japanese want that, the movie has done its job. Through a vastly changing physical landscape, vastly changing cultural landscape, so long as the Japanese maintain traditions, maintain connections in whatever way they can, the Japanese identity is not lost. Otherwise, Your Name's real missed connection is with Japan itself. So, like I was saying before, I don't want to convey that, like, this is what the movie is conveying to its Japanese audience, because, like, one, what do I know, and two, this is just one of many valid interpretations. But still, I've been wanting to make this video for years. I got the chance to go to Japan through my college back in 2018. It was a 2-week trip for college credit. You know, we wrote essays before we left and after we got back, but while we were there, it was a glorified vacation. And if you ever get an opportunity that sounds like that, take it. You know, I cannot stress it enough. You will never have that opportunity again, and you will not regret it. So take it. And I do plan to have another video about my time in the country, you know, soon, but when I got back, I was talking with a Japanese international student at my college. Let's call him Makoto, right? Like Makoto Shinkai. So I was talking to him, and he was asking me, like, where I went. And I told him, you know, Tokyo, Kyoto, Nagano, Hiroshima, Himeji, Kanazawa, Osaka, Kobe. And he's like, oh, like, you actually went to Japan. As in, you actually saw, like, the whole country. And I did name a lot of places, but there's a difference between the modern and traditional when you go there. Like, you cannot find tradition in Japan. So, like, when I came back and I talked to him, I like, took it as, like, oh, you didn't just see Tokyo, right? Because you can't go to Tokyo and get a sense of what Japan is. You can't do that. Like, Tokyo is great. It has a lot to love, especially for tourists, but you have to leave it if you want to see the full picture. And I'm so glad that I got to see Amino, even if I was only there for a day. And if you're thinking this video sounded a lot like an essay that was written for a school, that's because it was one. I wrote a 30-page paper about this movie that if I rewrote it, I probably could have made the 20-page count that they actually wanted. And it took me 2 years to rework that essay for a broader audience. And that's what this video is. As much as you might want me to share the 30-page essay that was repairing the Japanese sense of time through the cinema, I don't think you want that. Trust me. I hope you do look forward to that video where I go more in depth about my time in Japan, you know, telling stories about all the different places that we went throughout those 2 weeks, because I really did get the chance to see so much. I've been dying to talk about it, so I hope you do enjoy. And all that's left to say is that Your Name was the first film that I was truly able to connect with on so fundamental of a level. You know, seeing all of the different pieces come together and relating to it from the Japan that I saw, personally, replicated on the big screen. So, what's your favorite part of Your Name that maybe I didn't talk about? Or what movie, like this one for me, are you able to connect with on so fundamental of a level? You know, something like maybe Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That one's amazing, right? Let me know down below. And while you're around, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. I'm Raijin Rising. Have a good one. Can you imagine if Your Name just ended here? Wild, right?